in this end-to-end sort of modern work access scenario, identity is the only piece that you actually control. If you go back sort of to the early 90s when firewalls first were a thing, I know it seems like we've been talking about this forever. It's always interesting to think about how young our industry actually is. But when firewalls sort of were a thing in the early 90s, we essentially adopted the same model that had existed since castles were around, big moat, big wall. Before the internet, before the cloud, it was really easy to define a network perimeter using a firewall, and sort of everything inside of that was trusted, everything outside was untrusted. This is us, this is them, this is safe, this is unsafe. And as we got into the sort of early 2000s, the rise of internet and then a cloud, that traditional network perimeter started to erode. We had organizations like Jericho Forum, which became part of the Open Group pretty recently, saying things like deperimeterization, using big words like that, effectively talking about the dissolution of the sort of traditional network perimeter. And what you have now in the modern workplace is, if you think about the sort of 6 pillars of a zero trust model, you've got identities, devices, networks, applications, data, and infrastructure. End users in the modern workplace may be using a device that you may or may not manage. You may not be able to manage it to the degree that you might like. They're using network transport that is not yours, that you can't control. It's home Wi-Fi, it's hotel Wi-Fi, it's Starbucks Wi-Fi. They're accessing frequently, almost entirely in some businesses, applications that are not part of your infrastructure. They're hosted by a third party. They're SaaS applications. Data that belongs to you but is hosted in those third-party systems they're accessing, or even third-party data. So often what happens is that in this end-to-end sort of modern work access scenario, identity is the only piece that you actually control. And so you end up with identity as kind of the fulcrum around which everything else is balancing. And it's for that reason, whether we sort of like the idea or not, that identity has become kind of the beating heart of modern security. It's the center of what we call effective zero trust. It's also the center of what attackers are focusing on. So if you don't want to take the word of a vendor in the marketplace talking about identity as the modern perimeter, all you have to do is look, for example, at Verizon's most recent data breach investigation report. There's a fantastic graphic in there, which they do in their reports, which shows, how are attackers getting in? And there's a particular image I'm thinking of that shows on the y-axis time going back 4 years. On the x-axis is what percentage of this particular thing are they using to get in. And at the top of that list is credentials. Below that, you've got phishing. Below that, you've got vulnerabilities, exploiting vulnerabilities. But there's a huge gap between those two and credentials. And the interesting thing is, even if you went back 10 years, you would find exactly the same pattern. And if you look in that report, they talk about where do attackers use those credentials? How do they get them? Typically it's from credential theft. Also things like brute forcing passwords and stuff. But so, where we're at in the modern sort of security landscape, but also where we're at in terms of what is going to enable your business, is actually the same thing. It's identity in the center. And we know that's true because that's how attackers are focusing their energy.